Here we are once again at lawhub.lsac.org, and as a reminder, to access the drill sets, you're going to have to click LSAT Prep here on the left. Instead of going straight to the full test, you can go to drill sets, and when we're looking for a reading comprehension drill set, we're actually going to have to scroll past all of the logical reasoning drill sets. And for this video, we're going to click drill set number 5, and we're going to click new drill set. It'll take a moment to load up. It shouldn't take too long. You've got that delightful little gavel icon, and it's asking me to log back in. That can happen too. So we'll just click the sign in button, and you can see we've got our drill set loaded now. And on the right hand side, you can see there's a timer. I tend to just turn the timer off. It's at your discretion. It just counts up. It's not going to actually kind of note much in the session. And regardless of whether or not you have it up, you'll be able to see how long each question took you once you go back and review the results at the end. So to begin this passage, we're going to just click questions, and then we're going to engage in an upfront read. So we're going to select a highlight tool. We're going to basically ignore the question stem because we know we have to engage with the passage up front first. Now, the only negative of the drill sets is that you will not have the passage only view, which you will have on the practice exams and the official exam. So you will have to do a little bit more scrolling, but we've got our highlight tool ready to go, and we're going to read the paragraphs on the left one at a time and identify which single or pair of sentences in each paragraph best captures the author's main idea or kind of de facto conclusion for each paragraph to create an overall passage map of highlights that we'll use in all of the subsequent question evaluation and addressing. So we will start up top. Many people are skeptical about the feasibility of landing humans on Mars within the foreseeable future. Conventional plans for such a landing tend to justify this attitude. These plans were formulated with assumptions carried over from the only other successful human exploration of an extraterrestrial body, the Moon. In these plans, Earth is the primary source of command and control, the sole source of supplies, and the default target in the event of an emergency in flight. The much greater travel distance to Mars, however, calls for enormous amounts of fuel, and a launch directly from Earth would consume an impractical quantity. This necessitates building a platform in low Earth orbit on which to construct and subsequently from which to launch the vehicle. There's a lot of information actually in this introductory paragraph. So I need to be judicious in what I think the main idea is from the author. And it's really this statement right here of conventional plans tend to justify this attitude. This is the author's position, is that the skepticism that is presented by most people or many people in that opening sentence is justified. Now, when you have a scientific passage such as this one with a bunch of details that you feel are important, you can consider using a second of the tools in the interface, the underline tool, to just kind of delineate briskly what the individual pieces are so that you don't get bogged down in the details but know where they exist. So if we're talking about this here with the assumptions, you could just say assumptions carried over from exploration of the Moon. And I'm like, okay, so if I need to know why the skepticism is justified, one of the things is that they are basing it all on their experience with the Moon. We've learned that Earth is basically the primary source of everything. And so we could just kind of highlight Earth is the or underline Earth is the primary source. And we know there's a much greater travel distance to Mars. And there apparently would be building a platform in low Earth orbit. So there's a bunch of details that you might think are important, and if you feel they're important, use the underline tool to say, okay, this is stuff that I might care about when I need to read about details, but I don't want to consider it for our main idea highlights. So now we will go back to our orange highlighter color and we'll read the next paragraph and basically do the same thing. So from the top of the second paragraph, given the assumption that the crew would subsist only on what they could bring with them, their stay on Mars would be limited to approximately 30 days, causing two problems. First, this restricts the amount of exploration and experimentation the crew could do, especially considering that it would take astronauts a few days just to get used to low gravity conditions. To address this, conventional plans typically call for constructing a permanent lunar outpost that could be used in part as a training site for astronauts. The second problem is the length of time the crew would be exposed to the known degenerative effects of interplanetary radiation and zero gravity during flight. This problem arises from the fact that there are only a few launch windows in the cycle of Mars-Earth orbits when the distance is short enough to navigate safely. And due to the positions and movements of Mars and Earth within each window, travel time between the planets is much longer for missions involving short stays on Mars than for missions involving long stays. It is unclear that the gains of a short stay mission could outweigh these costs and risks. So, we've got what should be a pretty clear topic sentence that we need to highlight here, outlining the fact that Mars being a stay on Mars being limited to 30 days would cause two problems. And I honestly would probably just highlight this final sentence as kind of the author's main point, which is these 30-day stays may not be worth it. But again, just like we had in the first paragraph, you might feel there's a lot of detail that you want to grab onto. I need to avoid kind of giving in to that instinct, but you can deploy the underline tool one more time and just kind of underline what those big picture first and second problems are. We've got the restriction of the amount of exploration and experimentation that could be done, and then we've got the amount of time they'd be in flight and exposed to that radiation. All of the rest of it, I have to not just underline and highlight everything, but I'm like, okay, if we need to know what those two problems were, now we've got a direct locator that we can use when we reread. And then we just scroll on down to the final paragraph, and once again, we'll grab that orange highlight and we'll read from the top. An alternative plan that surmounts many of these obstacles has recently been proposed, however. This newer plan calls for abandoning the conventional approach's crippling reliance on Earth. It involves landing a fully equipped return vehicle, habitat, and supplies on Mars before the crew's arrival, in preparation for an extended stay of about 500 days. Among the equipment to be landed would be a module that could produce fuel from the Martian atmosphere. This module would obviate the need for transporting inordinate amounts of fuel, thus eliminating the need for the construction and maintenance of a platform in low Earth orbit. In addition, the plan gives the crew the flexibility to use Mars as a target in case of malfunction. An extended stay on Mars would also make the employment of a lunar training site unnecessary, allow for more extensive exploration, and significantly shorten total transit time. So, we once again probably have a relatively clear need to highlight the topic sentence. But in this case, I probably highlight the two sentences at the beginning and just get rid of the however in my highlights. Because if we read an alternative plan that surmounts many of these obstacles has recently been proposed, this newer plan calls for abandoning the conventional approach's crippling reliance on Earth. I kind of get the main point of this paragraph, and that kind of functions as the author's conclusion for the whole passage. There's a new plan, and it no longer says that everything has to be done from Earth to some degree if we're trying to go to Mars. And once more, if I want to highlight some of the details because I know that I get kind of lost in them, understanding that it's not germane to our main idea questions, but it could help with some targeted rereads later, I might highlight things like we'd just have landing a fully equipped return vehicle, habitat, and supplies on Mars. I don't want all of the details here, but we can highlight things like produce fuel from the Martian atmosphere. We could eliminate the need of a platform. Because all of these things we already talked about, we're talking about as a second time. We could use Mars as a target in case of malfunction. And that gets me some of those details that you might feel are important, but aren't actually going to be part of our main idea highlights, which we should reread as we always do after creating them. So, reading from the top, many people are skeptical about the feasibility of landing humans on Mars within the foreseeable future. Conventional plans for such a landing tend to justify this attitude. Given the assumption that the crew would subsist only on what they could bring with them, their stay on Mars would be limited to approximately 30 days, causing two problems. It is unclear that the gains of a short stay mission could outweigh these costs and risks. An alternative plan that surmounts many of these obstacles has recently been proposed. This newer plan calls for abandoning the conventional approach's crippling reliance on Earth. I think I've got the main ideas, and now we can go and address question one, which is asking for the main point of the passage. So we really should just be focusing on those six relatively short highlighted sentences that we just read. So starting with choice A, no matter what plan is implemented for landing humans on Mars, the undertaking will involve enormous costs and risks. Well, no matter what plan, we clearly have an author that prefers this alternative plan. So we'll eliminate choice A as just not matching those highlighted sentences. Then choice B, the main flaw in conventional plans for landing humans on Mars is the over-reliance of such plans on assumptions drawn from prior experiences with lunar exploration. This is true, and if we highlighted all those things that we kind of underlined just for future reference, but not to get bogged down in, we may pick this. But the main flaw in the conventional plans completely ignores the final paragraph, and we know that the main point the author has is, hey, we've got this alternative plan that might work. Then choice C, a new plan for landing humans on Mars successfully addresses some of the major logistical problems that made older plans for travel to Mars implausible. Ooh, I like that a lot. So we've got a new plan addresses those problems, and the older plans were calling travel to Mars implausible. So C hits on all of the pieces that we just read in our main idea highlights, and probably allows us to move a little bit more briskly through D&E. A plan for sending humans to Mars involving prior landing of various equipment and supplies would be easier to execute than any plan involving construction of a platform in low Earth orbit. Well, now that we like C, we probably key in on this idea of easier to execute than any plan. We can talk about how easy it is to do that alternative plan, and we can't say that it would be easier than any other plan involving a platform in low Earth orbit, so we can eliminate D as going a bit too far and being extreme. And then lastly, choice E, the main obstacle in sending humans to Mars is the inordinate amount of fuel required for the round trip from Earth to Mars. We don't know it's the main obstacle, and even more than that, it's certainly not the main point, and there's our correct answer of C. And hopefully you can see through this video how using the underline tool can help you manage the problem of feeling like I need to highlight everything. You don't want to highlight everything. You actually still want to stick to like one or two sentences in each paragraph, but you can use the underline tool to potentially help you track the details that you feel are important and potentially use those underlines in the subsequent questions that we're going to evaluate in additional videos.